A couple of weeks ago, I asked you to pay attention to what's not present in school stories as a way to understand what ideology represses. As I said then, girls are often an obvious omission from school stories. So it is a nice change to have another story focused on girls at school. We have a great opportunity this week and next to go deeper into how school stories use gender to assert cultural values. A Little Princess is a novel by an Anglo-American writer, though all of Frances Hodgson Burnett's books were set in England. Born in the manufacturing town of Manchester, Burnett moved to Tennessee when she was 13. She had experiences of poverty and opulence, which we can see reflected in Sarah Crewe's story in A Little Princess. When we have talked about women and women's values before this semester, we've often focused on how English ideology asserts that women naturally possess the softer emotions, such as kindness, gentleness, and love, while men naturally possess the harder qualities, including courage, honor, and strict justice. A Little Princess vexes some of these easy categories. Sarah Crewe demonstrates courage both before and after her father's death. She is strictly honest and never goes back on her word, and her love of justice allows her to understand the value of people like Becky, who are dismissed by the Miss Mincins of the world. At the same time, she brings what we could term a feminine cast to these masculine values. Her courage is in bearing with fortitude the hardships she encounters. Her honor is in speaking truth to power, and in standing up for the less fortunate. Her love of justice is very much in the orthodox Christian vein of defending the outcast. I'm sure you all know that J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, is Joanne Rowling in real life. Her editor at Bloomsbury, the first publisher of Harry Potter, suggested, or demanded, that Rowling use initials instead of her first name on the theory that boys won't read books written by women or featuring girls as main characters. When Harry Potter became a huge transatlantic success, Rowling's publisher thought that she could risk letting people know that she is a woman. After all, the books all have Harry Potter in the title, so boy readers could expect that the text wouldn't be too girly for them. I think it's a pretty sure bet that most readers of A Little Princess, historically, have been girls instead of boys. Not only does Burnett write under her own name, but the title of the book, come on. Interestingly, boys' school stories were read by both boys and girls, and even the Magnet had a both genders readership, as well as a large group of working-class readers. These differences in readership have to do with how power is distributed in society. Basically, people from groups with less relative power, in this case girls in the working class, consume narratives directed at the group with power, while members of the power class do not consume narratives directed at groups with less power. So Burnett is talking to an audience of girls in a school story that intersects with and also complicates the usual ideological bent of boys' stories. The novel is a 1905 revision of a story she first wrote in 1887, right in the heyday of the school story, but before stories set in girls' schools were widespread. The prime era for girls' school stories was the 1930s. Boys' school stories value pluck most of all. What is the equivalent of pluck for a girl? Boys' school stories posit school as a training ground for future leaders. Girls can't be future leaders, only future wives and mothers, so what is the purpose of school for them? Men's honor is connected to their role in ensuring justice in the world, both by literally being judges in courts of law and by their functions as guarantors of probity. What would honor look like for a girl? We can see a number of ways in which A Little Princess is immediately different from boys' school stories. Sarah Crewe is exceptionally smart, for example. Which boys' school stories feature a protagonist who is exceptionally smart? It's true that one wouldn't want to be as stupid as Bunter, but Harry Wharton, for example, is only good enough at school, not the top scholar. Tom Brown, frankly, doesn't care about his lessons at all, which is all right, because his father doesn't care about them either. Eric is a promising scholar, but it doesn't take much for him to devolve into an ill-prepared cheater. Sarah's cleverness is marked not by her working hard at school, but precisely by her not needing to. Her ability to speak French without studying it, because her mother was a Frenchwoman, is a good example. Remember, Sarah's mother died when she was an infant. She has literally never spoken to her mother. Yet somehow, Her mother's native language is passed on to her daughter, a literal mother tongue. Another key difference we might notice is in how the dunce of the school is portrayed. In The Magnet, Bunter is a flat-out fool, and the narrator offers him to readers for our amusement. Coker, another stupid boy, is also a comic figure. In A Little Princess, the Bunter figure is Ermengarde, but far from laughing at her, the narrator offers her to us as a figure we can empathize with. We find out things like her inability to satisfy her father's desire for her to be a companion to him because she is not clever, and either doesn't like or can't learn the things he wants her to know. Sarah finds her kindness, and also sees Ermi has a role to play as audience for Sarah's stories. When Sarah borrows Ermengarde's books and then tells her the stories in them so that she can be the daughter her father wants, Sarah clearly benefits, but she is not focused on her own pleasure alone. There is some sadness at the heart of Ermengarde's understanding that her father finds her a disappointment because of who she is. Burnett makes us feel that sadness and also shows us that by accepting Ermengarde as she is, Sarah can find her good qualities. That's a strong contrast with how Bunter is presented in The Magnet. He doesn't have any good qualities, and when Harry and the other boys tolerate or assist him, it's only because they feel a duty not to leave a classmate in the lurch, not because there could be any redeeming value to Bunter. Bullies at girls' schools are different, too. Flashman in Tom Brown seeks power through a system of terrorism against boys who are smaller and weaker. Lavinia's power before Sarah arrives is partly predicated on a girl's version of this same system, one that is built on social shaming rather than physical force. Her clothes and her social status within the school enable this bullying, though. And so Sarah does not have to fight her to escape her bullying. All she has to do at the beginning of the book is show up with obvious wealth. It's interesting to think about why Lavinia's bullying is different from Flashman's, and why Sarah's triumph over Lavinia is so different from Tom Brown's triumph over Williams. But probably the most interesting thing about A Little Princess is how Burnett gives Sarah feminized versions of masculine values. She is described early on as being a little soldier, and she explicitly talks to herself both before and after her father's death as a soldier who must endure stoically the hardships she faces. Even her insistence, after her father's death, that she continue to act like a princess is an emblem of the innate quality that gentlemen display. This actually gives us insight into one of the ideological moves of the school story. Obviously, one function of the school story in the school itself is to teach boys how to be gentlemen. But a key assertion of gentlemanliness is that what makes you a gentleman is always innate. Harry Wharton doesn't learn to be honest or trustworthy, he just is. And Bunter can never learn those things because he's just not a gentleman at heart. As is often the case with things that are basically cultural, ideology wants to assert that they are natural. Why are boys better at math than girls? They aren't, until girls get old enough to realize they aren't supposed to be good at math. Why are girls more empathetic than boys? They aren't, until boys realize that men don't have feelings. What Burnett is dealing with is her culture's preference for men's values over women's. The school story amplifies this preference. When Burnett writes a school story for girls, of course she understands how the school story as a genre functions. Her task, then, is to uphold all of the usual things while also asserting that girls who are reading the book have value.